Hi, and welcome to a Small Medium at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Hyson, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. Let me tell you about our special guest today. Georgia Jean was just a raunchy comedian performing with big name acts like Joe Rogan and Andrew Dice Clay at the world famous Hollywood Comedy Store when in 2004 a knock you to the floor spiritual event blasted her overnight into a new multidimensional skill set. She was a professional comedian for 11 years, and her name is one of the 500 names painted alongside the names on the walls of the world famous comedy store on Sunset Boulevard. By 2004, her gift as a trance channel medium spontaneously emerged. Georgia Jean had a spiritual event which changed her life. She connected with a group of non physical entities made up of angels, guides, and ascended masters who call themselves the Circle of Light. She spontaneously developed the ability to channel them verbally and transmit their frequencies energetically. For the last 21 years, Georgia has had, through them, thousands and thousands of transmissions. They have shared one of the most comprehensive overviews of how the matrix of reality is created, and most importantly, how we can generate radical shifts to assist both personal and collective evolution. Georgia and the Circle of Light have been featured on Gaia TV's interview with ED or Extra Dimension with Ruben Langdon and is regularly featured on Spread Your Third Eye podcast. In 2015, she co authored The Circle of Light and the Philosopher, Another Magnificent Day Keys for Unlocking the Soul's Potential, which was a #1 Amazon bestseller. Georgia has also been featured on ABC's Nightline, Beyond Belief, and the New York Times as well. Georgia is our first guest who is also a skydiver with over 500 jumps and counting.
Mhm.
Learn her full story in her podcast, Coming Out of the Cosmic Closet. This podcast is here to help people understand the journey of opening up multidimensional abilities in a world that doesn't believe most of it's real. Maybe you've got a weird ability or someone else you love does. Let's find out and welcome Georgia Jean here today. Hi, Georgia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good. We're having beautiful weather here, so it's been a lovely, lovely, lovely time.
That's
So
always
tell
nice.
me, you've not seen our show, I don't think, before, but when somebody comes on the first time, I always start off with their childhood because
Oh,
I find the most interesting things about some people's families. They're born into ones who are, doing psychic readings when they're born, and it's all around in their family. Other ones come into families that might be in the military or other places in the world and have zero exposure to these things. But some
yeah.
pivotal thing happens, and somewhere, maybe in their childhood or maybe later, it lands them on the path they are on today. So I was wondering
Mm.
if you could share a little bit about where you grew up, what your childhood was like, and if your family was supportive of spiritual and seeking ideas.
Wow, that's cool because I've talked about little parts of it, but no one's really said, tell me about your childhood, And actually, um, I had a pretty challenging childhood, but also, yeah, not a typical childhood. I was born in Melbourne, Australia, but at the age of like 6 months, my family lived in Papua New Guinea for a while. Um,
Wow.
and then we went back to Australia, and then I lived in Nigeria and Africa. And my mom was actually kind of had like a mental breakdown, had kind of mental illness all of um my childhood and stuff like that. And when we came back from Africa, my sister and I came back with my mother. My dad stayed in Africa and kept working there. He was a engineer, which is why we used to go to all these places. So we had a lot of like from a super early age, I was traveling, and that's probably why I'm still just a traveler. And it was imprinted in me, I guess, to be around in different places in the world because my time in Africa, I don't remember Papua New Guinea because I was a baby, but my time in Africa was very impactful on my worldview. And also, specifically in terms of the woo-woo stuff, I always had invisible friend, an invisible friend George, which I sometimes wonder is, because I ended up becoming a channel, what I was connecting with obviously was some kind of multidimensional aspect. And I actually wonder if it was like a future version of myself because I've done a lot of inner child healing work. And I sometimes wonder if it's actually me now visiting my younger self and supporting my younger self through a challenging childhood for sure.
And
Um,
the name was George, which is
it
like
was,
your
yeah, it was
name
George.
except the
Yeah,
masculine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah. And my sister used to be like, well, how do I have an imaginary friend? And I was like, well, just imagine it. But I think I really was communicating with something. And then when we moved back to Australia, my dad stayed in Africa. That was a very difficult time for me. And this house we lived in was kind of creepy. The minute I saw it, I didn't like it. And not that it was like ooh looking, but I just had a vibe. Maybe it had some haunty energy in it, but I feel like I shut down at that point. Um,
Mhm.
but I always had the curiosity. And when I was later living with my dad and now a stepmother, she gave me a book on palmistry when I was like 15, and I was sort of all into that, reading that. But I wouldn't have called myself psychic or intuitive at that stage. I would have called myself sensitive or intuitive, but not psychic. I wasn't getting stuff I couldn't possibly know, like names and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, that all really started to then open up when I actually moved to America, and I really um, started getting a little bit more into healing and I went and had some hypnotherapy where I spontaneously really regressed into past lives really easily. And then in between lives, I worked with this lady about 6 times, and she got me in between lives, which was pretty powerful. But I still was more like, oh, like I'm just curious about all this stuff. It wasn't until I had this actual like event that everything was kind of leading up to that my chakras got blown open, and then I started having much more psychic phenomena. Yeah, and there's this
How old were you when that happened?
that event happened in 2004. I was like 34 or nearly 34, 33.
Mhm.
Jesus age. So, but yeah, we were already having some kind of like more energetic experiences, woo-woo experiences, but it led up, and had learned about channeling from um Abraham Hicks. I actually went to see Abraham Hicks and was called up from the audience, and I think something happened during that that might have been part of the activation that later happened. Yeah.
Like a transmission.
I
And
think so because it was very
yes.
emotional. I remember being like going up to being called up and being all like teary and stuff. And at the time, I was a comedian. I was going through a lot of hard times, so it was probably emotional for me to talk about it. But there was and I know this happens with clients when they come and work with us that they'll just start crying or get emotional because there is like this sort of thing that happens when the frequency shifts for people, and you're just like all this high energy, and I've got all these feelings coming up.
Yes, and it's also great to bring laughter into it because laughter is such a healing medicine
Yeah.
that it's really and you already had that going. I just want to ask you a couple of questions about your life as a comedian, and then
Hmm.
we'll move on into the work that you're doing now. I was wondering, first of all, do you do stand up anymore, or have you stopped your comedian life altogether?
I very occasionally do it more in an environment where, like, I'm a skydiver now, so we have these big parties. They're called boogies, and like last year, I did stand up at the party. There's like music and stuff, and dancing and everything, different things on each night of these sort of events. So I've like hosted stuff. I've did do stand up last year, and that was the first time probably for about 10 years that I'd done it. So no, after the event, which happened in 2004, and it was pre-paved by me actually having to leave the comedy store because it was like this super toxic environment, and
Mm.
it was really causing me a lot of angst, which was a lot of what I was working on myself about at that time leading up to this, what was sort of was driving me more deeply into, therapy and personal development. And I was in like a kind of goddess group thing and stuff like that. And then after the event opened, so, and it was literally a week after I decided to leave the comedy store, which was a huge decision for me at the time because that was like my big break,
Mm.
but it was just so bad I had to go. But I think it was something that was necessary for me to have my event and open up, because a couple of times I did go back to the comedy store, it was it's actually renowned for being haunted. So the vibe, not just the people, but the energy was kind of like thick with this sort of like dense, kind of creepy energy. But I continued to do comedy, but having had that big kind of opportunity taken away, there was certainly a wound to my psyche on that part. So I was kind of going through a phase where I was still doing comedy, but still working with this energy that had come in, and it was wild, like um, this sort of
Well,
profound energetic experiences I was having.
I would think when you're a sensitive person, and
Mm,
then you're increasing your understanding of frequencies and sensitivities because
yeah,
you're having this opening that's going on,
yeah,
being in a place like you're talking about, whatever it is behind the scenes at a comedy club,
yeah,
between the
yeah.
competitive nature and what must go on
That's
in
right. Yeah,
entertainment business,
yeah.
I I think your heightened self must have started recoiling and thinking, wow.
Yeah, it was
This is
definitely, yeah, like it was definitely like the comedy store, forget about it. I mean, not every club is like that, but that place was, yeah, like kind of crazy in that regards. So I kept going, and but you are and honestly, part of the energy sensitivity does help with actually comedy, because I think when you're really good at improvising, there almost is a psychic phenomena where you just know what to say that's going to set the audience off, and you're having an energetic connection with the audience. It's like a roll of energy. But in that club, the comedy store, where I was being attacked and harassed by some of these guys, a lot of that actually would shut down, and I wouldn't do as well at that club because it was just a kind of like psychologically and psychically violent place. So I could never quite, it was having me to get that same level of a connection with an audience that I would have when I was performing somewhere else, because everywhere else was great. But I think it was just, comedy is a tough world in general, and you're kind of going for the big goals to alleviate yourself out of like the struggling poverty that comedians and actors go through in Hollywood. And it's just when you disconnect from that thing where you might get a bigger break, it's just a little bit more of a grind. But I think it was just, yeah, I probably was growing more. Definitely sitting and watching comics became harder too, because there was just so much like horrible stuff about women, and you're watching the same stuff night after night, and I just like feel it in my heart and in my chest,
yes.
like this is like plenty of, misogyny and just
And it was a men's field. I mean, aren't you were I mean, this was a while ago, 1997. This was an
yeah,
area where women were having a much harder time
much harder time. Yeah, and
competing.
it's
And yeah, I don't think men really wanted women in
I
the
didn't want
comedy.
women like you, because you would hear it every single night. And it's funny because I'm a skydiver now, which has a similar proportion to men and women, although I think skydiving is better. It is so much more of a supportive community. It's amazing. It's everything that the stand-up world, I probably wanted it to be like a family thing because I was far away from Australia and everything. And it wasn't. It was just the most toxic, horrible family. Ever.
So what?
I've still got friends in comedy, and not everybody experiences what I experience. So, I want to be careful. And now I'm in the skydiving world. There are many things that I have to work with psychologically, which are hangovers from that time, which was every night being told, women aren't funny. Basically, you're told every night you don't belong there. And that kind of
Mhm.
goes in on a deep level where it's very hard to hold your sense of value. And and your knowingness of yourself, you're just kind of being gaslighted every night because people are saying women aren't funny, but you're going out there making people laugh, and it's like, and you've always made people laugh, so, but that it's just a constant, yeah, imprint. And I really looked at that a lot as well at the time too, because I saw people who rose up at that time, because I used to perform with Joe Rogan all the time. And no, I wasn't like his chosen opener or anything, but we shared the same stage night
Mhm.
after night. And the people he brought up through his podcast, I mean, they were just some of the most horrible people I've ever met in my life, to be honest. Joe Rogan was quite nice to me. It's very confusing because you're kind of I mean, I think people know about fight or flight and freeze and fawn. Like, you're kind of in this environment where you're being attacked, so you find yourself having to kind of suck up to people who are just awful, and like that's all stuff you have to unpack later. Like, why was I? But you're just sort of trying to survive in an environment. And I watched how who was brought up and how they would become influential, and then lots of people watch them, listen to them, and people's psyches are really imprinted by um, these, performers and entertainers and comedians. Comedians get a huge platform when they become really successful, and it's part of the continuing imprinting. And I felt,
For some crazy reason, I took a stand-up comedy class. I
oh,
have
cool,
no idea why I even did this. It was never like in my thing. When I was a kid,
yeah,
I wanted to be an actress, but I
yeah,
don't know what possessed me to do this.
yeah,
And I found it very psychologically fascinating.
yeah,
And I could not do when we had to do our one performance, in our
yeah,
local
showcase,
little thing just for our friends and family or whatever. I found that I couldn't do anything that were actually jokes. I could
right,
only make jokes out of things that happened in my life. So I
sure,
could do stories and make comedy about something that was real to
yeah,
me, but I
yeah.
wasn't good at, like when he said, like, make up some jokes or do this kind. I couldn't do that kind.
I'm curious, where did you do your class?
It was here in where I live in, well, it was in Santa Rosa near us, but he was a very old guy that he had trained Robin Williams back in the day.
Right,
Back in
right,
the day, he was an old San Francisco comedy guy.
right.
Whoop.
Yeah, I wonder, I probably know his name if because that never sounds familiar to me, actually.
I
Uh,
wish I could remember his name.
yeah, yeah.
And
But you have to take the real life and put it into like the setup punch
y-
format.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was definitely my thing.
yeah.
So that experience really was a door opening for you with channeling and spirituality
Yeah,
because
well,
you're dealing with
yeah.
people.
Yeah, it was really because I was working on myself a lot. That's why I was sort of in this like goddess group, and then I had learned about law of attraction. So but actually there's the recording of me. It actually just resurfaced recently when I got to speak. You know who Abraham Hicks is, I'm sure. Do you know who Abraham Hicks is?
Who is it?
Esther and Jerry Hicks, and they channel all the stuff about law of attraction. I'm sure
No, no.
they're also channel it. It's a woman, Esther Hicks, and the consciousness she channels is Abraham, and they really brought through a lot of the information about law of attraction, being vibrational beings and all this sort of stuff. So and they toured around for years, and would do these seminars, and then they would record them and send out recordings of them. So there's like a recording of me being like, how can I use these concepts of law of attraction in my stand-up career? Because everything's going really, really, it's very harsh. And I try and go in there with the positive energy and, so I was using all that, trying like just going in when I felt really positive, and it just got so bad. But basically, the harshness of that experience really drove up my work on myself and starting to open up more about this kind of stuff. Um, but it's simultaneously a friend of mine who I actually is this girl that I met in Portugal who was from San Diego and actually said to me, "You should come out to America and be a comedian," because we just met. We were working in the bars there together. Which I did, much to probably her surprise, but she was the one we discovered Abraham together. And she had found this thing called a Pathfinder, which was like this shamanistic talking board, like a kind of like a Ouija board, but it was all in the light. And she could sit there and the disc would just spin around really fast and like just spell out all this kind of spirit dictation. And I would sit there and write the notes. This is before my event. And because we knew about channeling from Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks, it was communicating through the board that it wanted to speak through her, you know, the consciousness could give us a lot more energy about all our questions, which was along with like, when am I going to get a sitcom? It was like, am I going to get a boyfriend? And also tell us about the other side, you know, like what is
Mhm.
going on, you know, and how is reality created? And it was so through this, it was saying, if you let us speak through you, we'll give you a lot more information. And I was expecting it to. I left the comedy store. I went down to visit her like a week later, and I was sitting there writing in the notes, and it started to spell out there's masses of energy here. We want to speak through you. And I was expecting it to happen to her. And then through a side door, this energy just charged into me. And I just went into this like instant trance and was like, oh my God, I think it's happening to me. And then it just started to speak through me. And it was like, you know, we're here and we're here to help the planet and you will help us. Um, and, you know, there's a lot more channelers out there now, well-known people like, well, Bashar was around, but, you know, at that time, there weren't many people that people knew of as doing this phenomena. So it was all very like, whoa, what is going on? You know?
You know, also what interesting point here is I'm thinking about a woman I had on my podcast who passed away this last year, lovely woman named Nancy Rhodes.
Mm,
And she was, I don't know, in her if she was in her 60s or late 50s or something, but her whole life was putting on operas and musicals around the world. So she
mm.
had an opera company and they were in New York City and they had a whole building and all these things going on and they would go like to different countries and she went to Portugal
Oh,
and
yeah.
did, yes, and did a West Side Story.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And I believe it was Portugal. And after the show was over, she had this, sightseeing thing where you could go to see the house that Mother Mary of Jesus's mother had lived in after he had passed. It was like the
Oh,
place she had lived in her final years. And
right.
so she went out to see this with her husband just as a tourist. And this is a woman who never was into spiritual anything. She was
Yeah.
doing talent entertaining, bringing these shows around the
Right.
world
Right.
and, very successfully. And she goes into the little hut and has a complete channel download experience like
Download.
you're talking
Right.
about. And
Right.
it was
Right.
only because the other tourists hadn't come in at that second. So she was in this little hut by herself.
Yeah.
And when she
Right.
came out, her life was changed.
Changed.
And when
Yeah.
she went back for the next 10 years, she channeled she would go into some sort of like a
Yeah.
state. And
Yeah.
her husband would write down all the things that came through her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
she wrote her book.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
the story of Mary or Mary's story. I'm so bad at exact memory,
Oh, that's cool.
but it's a beautiful book. And when I read the book, like I'm not a religious person and I don't
Right.
come from a Christian background or any of this sort of thing. But when I read the book, it was hard not to believe that that wasn't real, that
Yeah.
she had not channeled this information. It really seemed factual and like how it probably really was.
Right. Right.
And and it was nothing. I'm saying this to point out to other people that this may just happen to you like it did with you all of a sudden in the
Yeah.
middle
Just
of a
like,
comedy thing. She was
yeah.
in the middle of doing entertaining, bringing a West Side Story there. I mean,
Yeah. 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 Like you're
who would
just like, this is my life. I'm trying to get on a sitcom and whoop, you know, like,
exactly?
whoop, you know,
And
new
she
show.
kept being called and had to do this. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad that we're sharing more than one person's stories of how this channeling experience can just happen out of nowhere. And you could be 30 or 50 or 12.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter the
It doesn't
age.
matter. And it very much is because we are going through this shift in consciousness, which was what it, you know, ultimately was all about. So it's been 21 years since I had that event. And I had no idea like what was coming down the pipeline in terms of the work that we have ultimately done. I had to go through a lot of my own. After that event, you're kind of going through stages of having your own ego broken down.
Yes.
So the streams of consciousness you can bring in. And I am what I would call like a broad spectrum channel. So I channel a lot of different energies and have in fact channeled the Christ consciousness and Mother Mary energy that kind of come as a duo. And they're in my book. They're actually the last chapter of my book. The Christ consciousness energy came in and she offered all the, and it's really like a consciousness. And this is something we're trying to help people understand that there are the concept of these figures, but consciousness outside of the egoic framework, like how we experience ourselves as human beings, is very different. It's like an ocean of energy, and this energy kind of comes in streams with different frequencies, vibrations, and then that energy can be embodied by people. So, like the Jesus figure, Mother Mary, um, um, the
Have
other
you
one,
ever had
Mary Magdalene, Jesus and Mary, those figures trained like many people train in, you know, spiritual abilities and then were able to embody that consciousness and become, avatars of it, if that makes sense. But the consciousness exists outside of those figures, and many people held the Christ consciousness energy at
so
that time.
I have guests that recently a woman named Maria. I don't judge anybody's thing. My show is all about sharing your stories.
Yeah,
And her experiences all had to do with interdimensional beings
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
healing through being in, you know, galactic ships
Like,
and these things. And I'm hearing more of this, and I'm wondering if any of the healing or channeling, have you had that kind of experience as well, where information is coming from a source that you would not say was consciousness from, say, necessarily a
yeah,
human,
for
but
sure. Yeah.
I'm using the word interdimensional
It's
being because I can see
interdimensional,
you.
like, yeah. And again, some people talk about these beings, and even I would say that I have changed the description of what the circle of light is from when you first start to channel, because humans are used to interacting with other humans, other individual beings. We
Hmm.
like that concept of other entities being, like a person or a thing or something's a bit alien, but it's still kind of like something in a body, if that makes sense. But once you drop the ego framework, everything is consciousness. So we don't, when I channel like galactic consciousnesses, we would just say it's consciousness that has evolved in other dimensions, other planetary realms. We don't, I have never channeled as other people who do this work specifics, like, I look like whatever.
The grays or
The
the
Greys or something like
right.
that. We've never channeled that way. It's never come through me in that way. And how do I put this? Because I want to honor other people's work. I think the way consciousness has come to speak through us is to actually break down a lot of illusions about consciousness itself so we can move our matrix. And, but for sure, people who are incarnating now, if you think about ourselves, everybody that we are, um, it's like a cocktail, so we're like a cocktail of consciousness. And some of our consciousness, maybe it has been human and has lived these other human lives, but some of our consciousness has evolved elsewhere. And so many people who have these abilities now are kind of like, and who are intrigued and drawn to this energy as well, whether you have the abilities or not, are more like these hybrid energies where it is consciousness that has evolved through the human realm here on Earth, and then consciousness that has evolved in other dimensions and planetary realms. Whether when you're in that consciousness, it looks like how we experience human life. Does that make sense? So I've channeled like,
Mhm.
yes, Acturian energy. I've channeled the sun consciousness, which is so everything is consciousness. It's all intelligence and it all has frequency. It all has again just intelligence behind it. So when the sun consciousness came in, because I'm always like, what? what's happening now, and something will just start pumping. I'll feel a shift in the frequency and something will start pumping and I'll be like, this is the sun energy. And so the sun energy is it's kind of like the consciousness from which all all things material as we experience actually comes from. So it made me understand why earlier civilizations worship the sun as God, because God, that is where everything emanates from, right? So sun consciousness energy is super powerful for like purification of old frameworks and templates and new source consciousness coming in. Like right now we're having all the solar flares going on, and with those solar flares happening, um oh my gosh, I just said that reminds me of a pretty wild dream I had last night. But anyway, the
Oh, good.
that are happening right now, it's this idea that the sun consciousness holds these new source codes that we're really calling in to help humanity evolve from the denser aspects that we've been living life through, to kind of burn away, melt old programs, and to actually bring in new source intelligence. Where as that comes in and merges with the earth consciousness, because that's how everything becomes materialized here on earth. We don't, and nothing exists on earth as a material thing without the consciousness of the earth supporting that manifestation. Now, this is all stuff that I've channeled over the years. These aren't just my ideas. This is all stuff that through thousands of these transmissions have come to understand, that we have this sort of source consciousness that comes in, and that
Hmm.
mirrored by the earth consciousness that can match that, the codes of creation that will actually make it physical and materialized, because the earth itself is like a multi-dimensional theater that a lot of stuff can exist here, if that makes sense. So
So do you, when you've had this, because I've been thinking about reincarnation
mm,
at different times in my life,
yeah,
and originally I thought, oh yeah, reincarnation. I was imagining how you just jumped into another body or something and you were here.
right, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
now that I've spent more time in on the other side, or whatever we want to call it, in the
sure,
invisible, I don't feel like that's how it might work. I feel like it
totally.
has something to do with consciousness,
Dreams.
that the death is the death of the body, but there's something that lives on. And I so far the best I've got in my mind is of thinking about this is that when we take our last breath, our consciousness goes out on that breath. Where the consciousness goes, I don't know. Where it goes back or in, or
Or
did you
what? Yeah,
did you
yeah,
have anything like that in your discussions with your masters or
yeah,
angels about that?
totally. I mean, first, like I said, when I actually personally had the reincarnation experiences, um, there was several where I was sort of experiencing death, and they were basically I was just flashing back into the death, the death scenes, like
Mhm.
fun reincarnation stuff, like so.
Yeah, yeah.
The first one, I was lying there and I just started shivering and shaking, and then like I was freezing cold, and then I started to see that I was like like an Inuit
Mhm.
child or person that had fallen through the ice and was basically drowning and freezing to death. And I saw like the face of my friend or whoever it was, maybe a sibling, looking through the ice down at me, and I was just freezing, and then I died. And so I had several of those where I went through the deaths, and it was really just in the final session where I was more like some old dude in Egypt that had been kind of a wisdom keeper, and I had ended up in I had I think a kind of a cancer, and I had ended up in like a death hut basically. Um, and then when I died, she was able to talk me through that release from the body and kind of rising up out in the body, and then kind of just releasing that itself. The sort of, I guess that there's the aspect of our consciousness that is the soul of me right now,
Mhm.
that kind of broke, and then I was just back into conscious connection with everything, kind of like the background I have here, just
Mhm.
in the oneness. So it wasn't like I didn't see the white lights or anything like that. It was just a return to the oneness with everything. And this sense of communication, 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 like this conversation, communication of everything that I had learned, everything I'd experienced, everything that was still out there, everything that could be, everything that hadn't been. And then from that communication, this decision to like reform as something and come back in. And that's why we talk a lot more about it's that even though I have memory, I have an aspect of me that obviously was that Inuit child and like the Englishman that died and the old dude in Egypt, the wisdom keeper that
Uh-huh.
died. I am not just them. I cannot just be in terms of consciousness. I cannot just be them because other consciousness had to come in to form me. We're always a cocktail. So it isn't as cookie cutter as I was this and then I died and my soul reformed exactly back into that. It's
Right.
some of that aspect pulled in another part of the ocean of all consciousness and formed something new, more like plasticine mixing, like a bit of this, bit of that. So as we are trying to evolve our human consciousness into something else, we like roses, we have hybridized our energy. So we have this human consciousness, but we're hybridizing it from other aspects of consciousness that evolved elsewhere in order to form something new and to evolve out of what some people talk about the 3D and the 5D consciousness. I'm not sure if you've heard of that or your audience are familiar with that idea, but the 3D consciousness is this human consciousness that has very much been stuck in survival programming. We have the programs of decay and entropy in the body. We have a limited lack consciousness about energy and how reality can be. That's all
Mhm.
programmed and imprinted in our human biological belief structure and our programming. And then this new consciousness sort of starts to come through either when I open up the gateway and we channel this stuff, which is basically saying, hey, you're actually not just that programming and conditioning, and you can actually bring in new intelligence and kind of like upgrade, kind of like a computer program where people talk about reality being like a simulation. We have this capacity to bring in new intelligence now in a
Mhm.
process that we actually call something like reincarnating without dying. So you're not, when we reincarnate, we're bringing in some of this and we're bringing in some other consciousness and we're forming a new person basically, or a new being or a new exploration of creation. What we're doing right now, which is different, which is part of this 5D potentiality, is instead of dying and going through childhood again, which is where we receive a lot of our unsupportive conditioning and programming in school and all that kind of stuff, and like media blasts and watching
Right.
comedians,
Filters. Filters.
all of that stuff that conditions us that we're actually trying to liberate ourselves from. Instead, we are opening up, we are dissolving all that programming and conditioning. We're opening up to receive new intelligence, but we are consciously reincarnating, if that makes sense. We're not dying, being on the other side.
R- Right. That would be a whole different way of entering.
It's a whole
More
different way of it.
conscious, more aware.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I I have a couple of questions about this, about consciousness.
Yes.
And also, but before I go on to those, I also want to talk about heart centering and spiritual awakening.
Yes.
But I have to ask you because I loved watching your video where you were working with the hoop.
Oh, hula hooping. Yeah.
Yes, and I just find you a fascinating guest, even though I want to go back to more things
Yeah.
about consciousness. I
Yeah.
want to know about what, because when I saw you doing it and I'm watching the flow of the hoop go from here to there, I'm
Yeah.
feeling like I'm feeling something lovely in watching that. And it
Yeah.
made me want to, I wanted to know how you got involved in hoop, what it did for you, and what this just the symbol of a circle is such a beautiful
Yes.
thing.
And it's funny, I gave my company name Circle Evolution long before I was hula hooping as well. It was the Circle of Light, which is our the guides inspired that. My business or whatever you want to call my entity that is
Yes.
work that we do is called Circle Evolution. So it was about the circle of light and the evolution of consciousness. And Hula hooping, it's funny because I think it's one of those things where I saw it before I had my event. I saw these girls hula hooping at a like a fundraiser for a theater company. This is when I was in my showbiz days, and they just looked amazing. It's kind of the same thing. They looked amazing. They were just in this flow. Their bodies looked amazing, and I'm like, man, that is so cool. And then it was actually years later when once again I was attending the wedding of my friend that I had the event with, who I'd met in Portugal, told me to come here, had the event with, and all that. She was getting married. I was already channeling and stuff like that. But a huge component of what I have been channeling about is also about the nervous system and how the survival mind actually controls our concept of reality and our potentiality through that. So it really limits us, because our minds and survive and nervous system wants to keep us in the known zone, even when the known zone is hurting us. Um, but I went to a wedding. I was staying at this girl's house, and she had a hula hoop. And this is like 10 years after the first time I saw it. And I picked it up and I started hooping and playing with it. And I was like, "Wow, this is really amazing!" And I instantly got hooked. I went back to New York, where I was now living, got some hoops and just started hooping. And what I discovered was that the hoop was so powerful for calming the nervous system. And then when
Mm.
I learned EFT later in life, which I'm not sure if you guys know about
I've
EFT
tried it.
tapping, yeah, I
Yes.
realized that the hoop actually is tapping your body in a very similar way, and what makes it very therapeutic. And plus, it's just the way you're moving and learning these movements. You're kind of balancing the left side of your body and your right side of your body, like brain balancing. It's just hugely therapeutic. It's amazing. It's funny you bring it up because I was actually on the drop zone here yesterday. I brought out the hula hoops and we were having a weather hold, like nobody could skydive because the weather wasn't good, but all my skydiving friends just started hooping with me and it was so great. And they're a very open consciousness people, and the way they were all just thrilled to like pick it up and start hooping it because they're already kind of at that frequency was really cool. Yeah, but it's wonderful. It's amazingly therapeutic. And even how I got into skydiving kind of came through the hoop because I taught a hula hooping, this way of working with the hoop to open up the body through the movement, through the tapping, and open up the body. And then I would channel and bring in this high frequency energy so it could embody. And I did it in Hawaii. So in the same way, then we went out into the beauty of Hawaii and we're kind of receiving the frequencies of Hawaii. So it was like this very intentional way to use the hoop to open up the body to receive higher frequencies for embodiment, and then through that process like shift reality basically. I don't know about anyone who attended my retreat, but my life changed because after I finished the retreat, I went to Oahu and I met some people. um, I was hooping on the beach and someone started talking to me, and I ended up going to an acro yoga jam, and there was some skydivers there. And that's when I ended up doing my first skydive. Um,
So hooping led you into
it
skydiving.
led me into Hawaii. And when I got to the drop zone, there was another girl that hooped there. And I'm like, man, the vibe of this place is like everything that I love, all put together in one place. And that started my journey in skydiving. And of course, skydiving really continued in a much more intense way. I can tell you the work about really understanding the nervous system and how it controls us, controls our thinking, stops us from doing things, because I really had to battle it out with mine to
Watching the video of you of and that and then the man or whoever and you went jumping out of the plane,
yeah, Ruben, yeah,
saying
yeah.
to myself,
Yeah.
I've never wanted to do that.
It's
And then
not for
when I'm
everybody.
watching it, I'm saying, that's probably why you should try it, because if you're afraid, that might be something you should
Right.
check out.
Well, it's amazing because every tandem instructor, I think, in a weird way, is an unconscious healer, because you watch people's lives uh, change all the time from doing it, from facing that fear, from going up in the plane, from jumping out of the plane, landing safely, and they're just the elation. And even skydiving, I have discovered there's even aspects of skydiving, which helps a lot of people with like depression and anxiety, because
Letting go. You're
it's
letting
letting
go in a
go.
big way.
And it's also a way that our nervous system, so our nervous system controlled by the vagus nerve, we have three
Mhm.
ways that we're functioning, which is stay and play, which is the ventral vagal. I'm not a super expert, but enough to speak a little bit about it. ventral vagal state, we have the fight or flight mode, and then there's another aspect of the vagus nerve, which is the dorsal vagal system, which is total collapse and shutdown. And that's what's really happening when people go into freeze or fawn. Um, their nervous system, like if a little mouse was running, eating on a field and is all happy, it's ventral vagal. Then the eagle comes, it goes into the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. And then when it no longer thinks it can run or fight, it goes into collapse, which is the vagus nerve, which is the dorsal vagal state, which a lot of people who are suffering from depression and collapse are actually trapped in that mode. And the only way you can get back to the ventral, well, to get back into ventral vagal, because what will happen is people will go from depression to fight or flight, depression to fight or flight. But if you are held in a safe environment through the fight or flight stage, you can click back into the ventral vagal state. It's actually how the nervous system works. So a lot of people, when they go out who are struggling with depression, they go out on a skydive and they're safely held through that fight or flight state by the tandem instructor. It will click them back into ventral vagal. And that's why people land and they're just elated and their life has changed and
Wow.
they have been moved. They're never, and now there's other ways you can actually do it yourself. Like you don't have to do a skydive, but I'm always exploring why these different experiences bring such significant changes to people. And there's real biological things that are going on that make these things have a major impact on people's lives.
I'm so glad you brought that up, all about the nervous system, because I never was even thinking of that in relation to that. All I
Mm.
was thinking of that, well, people are facing that they might die, they might not
Yeah,
make it to the ground, and that
yeah,
that was all I thought about in facing
yeah,
something like that, but not the fact that what the whole physical body is going through. So
yeah,
great point.
yeah.
Okay, so we've got our hoops, we've got our flying. So now I have a couple more questions here that are a little bit more deep,
Mm.
which is, what is the evolutionary shift in consciousness?
Yes. So that's pretty much what I was talking about before is like, so if you think about this creative, if you understand that we incarnate to experience kind of like this creative experience, consciousness incarnates into a body to have this creative experience. And
Hmm.
the human consciousness has explored these storylines for eons now. And a lot of those storylines have been driven by survival consciousness. So when we talk about how that plays out into the theater of experience, now we're talking about war, we're talking about suffering, we're talking about famine, disease, the control, hoarding and controlling of resources on the planet. All of this is driven by the survival consciousness. There's not enough, it's a lack limitation. I take care of only my tribe. Everybody else is an enemy that needs to be killed off.
Mhm.
And even when, just getting back to when the Christ consciousness energy came in for the first time, and again, this is stuff I've channeled about. That Christ consciousness energy, when that came in and was held by the Jesus figure and the people around him, really at the time, there was a lot of people holding that frequency. It's a big new frequency that kind of hit the planet. It actually brought in this idea of love, and it was love beyond survival. So prior to that, love was only something you felt for your family or anybody that was innately connected to you surviving. It was a survival emotion. Christ consciousness energy came in and said, you can love everybody. This frequency is to be shared. So it started to be an insertion of consciousness that started to break down the survival framework that we lived in from the inception of us kind of coming out of the primordial soup and turning into human beings, basically.
Mhm.
That was survival, which I've also channeled about survival insanity, where we were brutal. Like the first humans, anything that was going to weaken the human race was destroyed. Babies were eaten, like it was gnarly. And I think that's why we see a lot of this sort of storyline kind of coming up in social projections right now, because we did the human physical biology and consciousness evolved in a very gnarly way. Let's just put it that way. And it's been evolving ever since. But Christ consciousness came in and said, okay, we can love everybody. We've figured out how to survive enough. We can start to love everybody as human beings. But we still have this old biological system that creates things like, otherness. Like, why do people hate other races, other countries?
Uh,
Why is war?
like what's going on in the world now.
It's
It's like
it's really
hard
intense.
to imagine that one human would torture and kill all these other humans. Like when you
Yeah,
see that a
yeah,
human, you see that the human is possible, that they can do such horrifying things. I
yes.
wonder in my mind, how did they get to that place where
Well, this
there's no love or
there's no
heart?
love. Yeah, and this is really interesting because what is going on with the evolutionary shift is that in order for us to move to the next level of our consciousness, which is the 5D, which is actually a reality created by the heart, which doesn't have the programming of the lack limitation, the stuff that drives people to do these horrific things. It is also multidimensional. It is where we understand more that we are multidimensional beings and that we can actually download consciousness from the infinite intelligence of all that is so we can evolve ourselves. That learning and growing isn't just what we do with our physical senses, but the way we let consciousness come in and shift us from the inside. In order for us to make that shift, we have to, it's, this is all the stuff I've been channeling about for a long time. Oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me.
Bless
Um,
you.
is that because energy can't be created or destroyed, we're actually pulling energy from those old horrible storylines and purifying it and doing this sort of work. A lot of people who do the work that I do, we're doing this work of kind of harvesting the energy from these horrible old storylines and purifying it and making it available to be re-imprinted by this new consciousness energy that comes through the heart center. And part of the reason why we are seeing so much of this really awful stuff right now is that it's always been there, but it is surfacing for us to see, to drive humanity into a stronger decision point that we don't want that anymore, which sends out the signals to consciousness. Okay, we are ready to evolve. And as we're recording this, we're actually in a massive gateway right now where these kind of portals of energy are opening up and new consciousness is pouring in as a response to that. If people have studied about law of attraction on a basic level, a personal level, it's like you ask for what you want, source consciousness answers that, and then you have to be able to receive that and then bring it into manifestation, basically. So we are in, from a human collective point of view, a massive asking phase where it's like where, and the thing is, for a lot of Western people who live in a great deal of comfort relative to a lot of the rest of humanity that have suffered more or are in suffering, or the history of suffering of humanity, there has always been a bit of a distance to that level of barbarism, if that makes sense. But
Mhm.
now it's all surfacing in a very powerful way. So we as a collective can say, we want something new and start to put that asking out. And then people like me and the people who work with me, a lot of the clients who come to me, we work with this stuff, this collective energy, these kind of like what we call planetary templates and existence templates, where we will look at the big storylines and go, what is the theme of that that storyline, or what is a theme in my life that's going on that is also reflected in some of those big stories. So people who are struggling with money, it's their money issue is connected to this bigger platform of lack, limitation, survival consciousness, and it may be reflected in those stories where children are being starved and that sort of stuff as an absolute amplification of that. So we will work to pull all that energy in and process it, and purify and harvest it, and then we surrender, we give it to the heart to let the heart create the new reality with. So that's the big picture of the work that we do and that we've been doing, and the information I've been receiving for like the last 20 years about how we shift humanity into new reality. But right now the horrible stuff is very amplified, and it's also up to us to also understand that our minds, programmed as they are from this deep subconscious program in the old human paradigm, we actually don't know how to create the new reality with our conscious and unconscious programming. And that's why the other huge piece is this work of coming into submission into the heart and recognizing that. Because you can look right now, especially the last few years, like everybody's talking about the problems and everybody's trying to fix it from the mind, and it's only getting worse because the mind holds the illusions of separation. It holds the illusions of polarity, of survival construct. That's all the 3D stuff that we're trying to transcend right now. So we're not going to fix the major issues that we're seeing in the planet through our minds. All the talking points, all the opinioning, and all of that. What is coming up is actually for us to see the futility of the mind, to see how it is futile when one side says the other side is wrong. And we're seeing it at the worst right now. So we can actually be broken as a collective and
Mhm.
realize that our minds don't know how to fix this, and we need to surrender to something greater to allow new. That's how we give permission for the broader consciousness to come in and kind of intercede on our behalf and create something new through the heart center.
And in the heart center, I think of the connection as we are one.
We are
That
one. It is the unified
place through the
field.
heart, that's where that is made,
That is where it's made. And it's
connection.
also, it is through the heart center, we actually access the intelligence behind everything, the all consciousness. So we'll use the term all consciousness because it's not as charged as saying like God or whatever. It's the consciousness of everything. It's all consciousness. Therefore, there is the intelligence that is behind everything that is manifest, which is the God brain, if you will. That
Mhm.
is accessed through the heart. And when we surrender to the heart, we're actually, so when we have these big problems in front of us, if we can actually drop our egos and say, okay, we fundamentally don't know how to fix this. So we have to surrender this. We give it to the heart. We turn it over to the heart and the all consciousness to create something new. But humanity itself, and if your viewers feel deeply impacted by what we're seeing right now, it seems it's so gnarly. Um, this is the message of our work, is to say one of the most powerful things you can do is get out of your mind and give all this energy to the heart and surrender it over. And through that, we will shift into a new bandwidth of creation, a new game, basically. We're not going to fix the old game. We're actually getting energy from the old game, and we're just giving it to the heart to create a whole new game.
Well, see, I think because of podcasts and people being able to share their thoughts and experiences and ideas around the world in different countries and different places and not have to leave your house,
Yeah.
so many wonderful things are being shared. And I think that it's the pockets of people like yourself and many others all over who are in maybe small sanghas or little groups that are doing things towards a positive, energetic, healthier way.
Yeah, for sure.
The monks who are meditating in the mountaintops. I'm always thinking how grateful I am that there's that other balance out there of
Yeah.
people who are spending that time in the energetic fields and
Yeah.
doing the kind of work like you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's
Especially
all
if
important. It's very important. It's not,
super
it
important.
all counts. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
all comes together like we are one, and everyone that is in feeling that we need to have a, consciousness levels need to be raised.
They need to be raised. And this is why also the a lot of people living lives that aren't materially, physically as brutal as those storylines that we see that really are just absolute devastation. We are supported to do that side of the work, but
Mhm.
that's why a lot of us feel the angst of it very deeply. So a lot of people who are in material comfort actually are suffering because we are all connected by the fabric of human consciousness. And that is what's being broken down. There used to be more of an ability to keep it separate, like, you know, we're actually breaking down the illusion of separation. So we are more in tune with that connection to everything, and that's why we feel it. And if you're not like wanting to feel that, that is just what is happening, and that is why so many people are on the healing path now. And now men are starting to finally get on the healing path a bit more, as a collective. I know there's always been some men, but if you've been working on
No, I
yourself
used to
a long
go to all these different, I've been to so many different retreats and different conferences and different things. And I would always look to see what the ratio of men to women were in every
time.
group. And
Yeah,
there were always much more women in
much
the,
more women. Yeah.
except when I went to a Zen retreat.
Right,
And
right.
that was the only place where I saw more men than women.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think Zen has often appealed to men a little bit more. But yeah, absolutely. So, but it's starting to happen. There's huge movements with this healing. But for a lot of people, it starts with their personal pain. And this is what, for me, it was my personal pain at the comedy store. Like, why am I going through all this horrible stuff? But really, a lot of the stuff I was going through was very archetypal. And one of the big breaking points for me was because I didn't want to get hounded out by these guys. And when I had to, because I wanted to stand up for women, and I wanted to be stronger than what was going on, and that actually cracked my ego a lot. Um, to actually have to give up on that what I call the good ego, which is still the ego basically, and realize that, and when something bigger happened, I realized that my own ego was even getting in the way of me making a deeper connection, even though it was my good ego. But um but oh, I got lost track in the but all those themes that I went through are still archetypal themes, the oppression of women throughout the history of
Right.
humanity. So everybody who comes to me and comes to, not me, is like the circle, because they're so awesome. Like, I'm just speaking on their behalf basically. But the most people who come and work with the circle they either have had a high degree of difficulty in their life, or they're trying to do something really big. And it's in the going into the concept of resistance. Like, why, if you want to do something really big, like say you did want to set up like a foundation to bring free healthcare to, millions of kids, right? That's a big dream and goal. If it doesn't already exist, it's because there's a lot of resistance to it. And that's our job, is to go into the energy of the resistance and find the energetic themes and templates that are creating that resistance. And we have these sets of tools that we work with to dissolve the resistance. But it's not just dissolving the resistance, it's actually harvesting the energy from the resistance,
Hmm.
transmuting it, and then putting it towards those things. So it's a real energy alchemy. But a lot of people who come have this high degree of density in some way, high degree of resistance that they're working with. And our tools, and that high degree of density is connected to the collective resistance. It's not just my personal, problem with money. It's the history of scarcity and suffering and poverty throughout the history of the planet that we're working with, we're harvesting energy from, to put towards new frameworks of consciousness, which are about unification, oneness, and true abundance. Like, the earth consciousness is a fully abundant resource, but it doesn't want its energy hoarded by a few. So it's
Hmm.
not. You may have noticed there's also been a lot of nature, kickback going on right now, because it's part of the breakdown. The Earth's resources are for everybody, not just for a few. And that's another thing that's being broken down right now.
Yes, and I'm watching nature like show, I'm not sure, like governments and people in charge think you can't control nature.
Yeah,
If the volcano is going to erupt there on the Big Island, it's going to do this.
it's going to do. And
If
and
there's
it's
going to be earthquakes here in California, we're going to be having earthquakes. There's
yeah.
nobody that's going to stop any of these things. And it seems to me in the last years recently that we're having more and more natural I feel like it's Earth yelling back at
Really.
everybody.
Well, I will share something with you, and actually,
Yes.
this recording is available in my free recordings on my website.
Hmm.
I recorded it I was actually living in Hawaii at the time. I just moved to Hawaii, and it was at the end of 2016. And this consciousness came through called the Guardians of the Earth. So I'm glad you've already validated the Earth events have been really kicking up a storm. And it basically, and I don't usually channel stuff that feels this kind of like little bit, a little bit ominous.
Hmm.
But it was basically saying that the human collective have, gone off the rails, and that Earth, what just really, if you just think about consciousness, the amount of consciousness that is in the Earth itself is so much more than any of us. It's more than me. It's more than the government put together. Like the actual intelligence in Earth, the volume of energy that makes up Earth is way bigger than all of us. And it's bigger than an organization. It's bigger than a wealthy family. It's bigger than a secret organization. Whatever our minds put is an idea of power out there over us, which is part of the illusion of the mind, the Earth is bigger. So the Earth controls the game. And we need to really understand that as a human collective. And what when I did this channeling, it basically said what I said. The Earth does not want its resources hoarded in this lack limitations human framework structure where only a few benefit and others suffer. And they basically said we can target, the consciousness said Earth consciousness can target whoever it wants anytime, pinpoint down to a house. There's that much intelligence in Earth consciousness that we don't understand and that we underestimate. It can identify who is effing the people of the world, and not just the people,
Right.
but the plants, the animals, and everything, and pinpoint it and start to. It's going to start acting out on it. And after I channeled this, yeah, the number of earthquakes and like the big one, huge thing was like I think it was Houston had massive floods. Of course, that's the oil industry. Rupert Murdoch's house almost burned down in the LA fires. I was watching like, wow, Mother Earth is like looking and being pretty pointed. And I don't want to say everybody who's suffered a natural disaster is a bad person. I don't definitely don't want to put that out, but there is definitely we need to acknowledge that the earth will course correct it. And not long before the pandemic happened, I channeled that collective again and it said, "You're not listening. We're going to have to show you even more how powerful Earth consciousness is." And I lost that particular recording, but it was a little bit chilling. And then when the pandemic happened, I was like, you know,
Here we
whatever
are.
storyline people want to say, where it came from, whatever, we have to acknowledge that viruses are part of Earth consciousness. Everything is part of Earth consciousness. It can
Mhm.
use whatever it wants to course correct us. And I don't want to doom and gloom on this, but I want people to understand, to see these signs and realize that why we as a human race have to get with the program. We have to get in. The only way we're going to transcend our survival consciousness is to start flowing energy through our hearts. Because even me, we all have a nervous system that's controlling us. I've faced mine a lot. I know how it will speak to me. I know how it will polarize on somebody when I feel threatened. I've observed it. I've seen it. The polarization we see in the planet right now is this act out from the collective nervous system. We have to recognize that it's only through getting out of our minds and through the heart will we bring balance back to humanity with the earth we share, and also bring in this new potentiality where we can all thrive in union with the earth.
This is where I feel that, and there's, I know, been a rise of this, of about shamanism, because
Absolutely.
we are talking about cultures. I was initiated as a Mongolian Buryat shaman of healing
Oh,
back
man.
in 2012 by
Amazing.
an amazing Mongolian shaman who came here from Mongolia, Zagda.
Mm,
And we did this entire ceremony without a translator. So
mm,
it was 7 days of preparation, all with telepathy. and
Amazing.
it's very powerful, and nothing I asked for but presented itself at my door, so I opened it and let it happen. But the point of this being that what I've learned from shamans that I worked with in the 80s in the Huichol community in the mountains of Mexico, and these are thousands of year old. These have been shamans for thousands of years. The same
Yeah.
in Mongolia. In Mongolia, shamanism is like the religion. It's not like what we think here. Oh, the shaman's going to play the drum, woo woo, feathers, and
Right,
that's it.
right,
It's a
right.
very powerful teachings that date back to the times of Genghis Khan,
Yeah,
and these teachings all have to do I mean, this is what I find similar when people have asked me, what do you think of similarities in these different shamanism and the different cultures that I've had the honor of being, involved in directly? It's always honoring nature. It's honoring the sky. In Mongolia, it's the sky. In
mm,
the Huichol, it's the sun. I
mm,
mean, all these different cultures, they have always, the Native Americans of America here, when they took care of the land here, they had fires that were meant to be fires to keep the place under control. They had things
yeah.
all growing, everything was going smoothly in the nature land until the white men came in and
I
destroyed it
love
all.
the existence, yeah.
And so now there's this I see there's this trend now of people trying to learn about things from the Native American people now on how to tend the land and how to
Absolutely.
take it so that it isn't destroyed like what you did already. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
saying this knowledge has been here in these cultures for a long, 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 long time. And
Yeah,
they respected this. And I'm glad that this is coming back out again, even though it's mixed with charlatans and, oh, you could be
sure.
a shaman if you pay me $3,000 or whatever. There's a lot of that crap. But the real shamans that I have spent time with, that have spent time praying for the sky and the water and the trees, this is what I feel like, that good energy going toward those things are parts of the positiveness of the change and
Totally,
shift.
totally. And it's really that's the thing too with the energy work that we do is that we're bringing in those codes and people are receiving those codes and starting to embody it. It starts to shift the core frequency. So the alignments and the behaviors start to become more natural, um,
Hmm.
where the behavior starts to change in an organic way because that union with the like, when you surrender to the heart, you're saying, bring in the consciousness that I need to become the being that I can be that is in union with and it's something we call the heart blueprint, which is it's a blueprint created from consciousness that holds the balance of everything with the earth, with everything. And if I can surrender to that, it's more about opening up to receive it and embodying it and becoming it that way rather than kind of like making it happen, like uh,
Right.
from my mind, I think I should fix, what's going on over here with this is actually about let me surrender first, receive the intelligence and become it and then live it. And then the new innovations will come from that, not from the mind from which all our problems are actually generated.
And that right, and it's really like a dream.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're on our hour now, and I want to know if there's two things. One is I would like to know if there's any more things you'd like to share or anything else you want to leave our audience with.
Yes.
And the other thing I would like you to do is, even though this will be in our description, I always like if you would say your website or whatever thing you would want listeners to know on how to contact you.
Sure. Thank you. So heart centering is massive. It really is. It's really the key. So earth grounding, heart centering are and being in the now moment. That's the other thing, because everything that we want to have arrive, including the new earth, including the new intelligence, it's going to arrive in the now moment. So if everybody, it doesn't matter, you don't have to deep dive in all the stuff that we're talking about, but if you can develop a practice of heart-centered earth grounding and being present in the now moment, and also not getting caught up in what we call the shiny toys of the mind, because the other thing is that the mind, in order to stop us from evolving, to prevent us from going into submission to the heart, will keep throwing sensation at us, and to keep us in our mind's analysis and like rumination and, the mind's gossip, the mind's storytelling. So to become aware that if you do have a shiny toy, a big story that is distracting you or disrupting you, to take all that energy and give it to the heart, and to come back into your now moment as much as possible, and to do the earth grounding, because that is actually what's going to bring the new consciousness intelligence into physical manifestation. And I have on these tools, they're actually, we use a lot of love and acceptance as well. We have a core framework of tools that we use with everything, and it's so important to me that these things get out, because I'm very blessed to get all this information from my guides. It's very important for us to share the tools with as many people as possible. So on my website, I have a thing called the Path to Mastery gift bag, and it has a lot of these core tools and the most important things people need to understand right now. And you can pay what you can for that. You can pay nothing for it. Um, and just get those, because that's where we're putting like the cutting edge info in, that what things people need to be working with right now in regards as tools, because
Mhm.
we don't actually have to do endless personal development and spiritual work. That actually starts being a way the mind distracts us to be like, well, let's analyze another past life, and and keeps distracting and distracting. Once because it's so clever, the mind, it so wants to keep control of the game, it will use your strengths and now start to use that as weakness. So submission into the heart is really about just focusing energy through the heart and receiving. And so I include that tool of how to do that in that gift bag, and now moment practice, earth grounding work, and stuff like that. And just to give people the basics of how to really shift the paradigm instead of getting lost in even more spiritual stories and more woo woo things that are actually a distraction from this very important work. Because I think most people are working spiritually or on personal development because we want a better planet. We want a better world. We want to actually leave something for our next generations that's of value and worth. And with things like AI, what we're seeing a lot now is these concepts of omnipotent power that we can really be afraid of, like something like AI that's coming in now. If we don't get centered in our hearts, and we start to play the game with things like that through our minds, we're going to amplify the polarities and the illusions of the mind that bring suffering. So this is again why heart centering is so important, because we can use AI in the heart blueprint within balance, or we can, whatever it is that feels like it has this omnipotent power. The internet was like that. Now we have AI. When we are seated in our hearts, we actually find the balance, and the heart creates the balance and we receive it. So it is the most important thing right now, whether you want to think about it coming from beings, extra, forget all that, just work on the heart centering, and it will bring so much joy into your personal life too. Like the
Mhm.
way I have seen the heart, because the heart is non-linear. It doesn't, this is the other good part. It doesn't have to obey the logic linearity of the mind, where it's like, if we're going to solve the world's problems, we need to do this, and then we need to do this, and we need to do this. And that has a timeline that our mind generates that we're restricted by. When we go into submission of the heart, we're accessing that master consciousness. It manifests from a non-linear place. That's where the miracles happen. That's when the crazy shifts happen overnight, the synchronicities, all the magical stuff, that's generated by the heart. So even from a personal level, if you don't care as much about the big picture stuff, if you want to vastly improve your life and really come into alignment with the life you love, the heart centering is the key. So that's the most important thing for us to share right now. Yeah.
That, thank you. That's a beautiful message to leave with our listeners. And if they want to go to your website, can you tell
Yeah.
them that's
Yeah.
what, and just say it slowly in case they're
Yeah.
writing it down.
So it's circleevolution.com. Circle like the shape, evolution like evolution of humanity.com. Um, we also have a podcast that one of my clients loved the work so much he made this podcast, which we shoot live. Maybe you'll come down to LA sometime and shoot an episode with us. I'd love to have you on, and hear
Yes.
certain experiences. And what we do is we have guests come on and talk about what they're doing, and then they interview the guides, the Circle of Light Eye channel. So, Spread Your Third Eye is the name of the podcast. And if you want to really deep dive, there's every podcast is like an energy transmission. It's a portal, it's a gateway, it's a teaching, and it's also a good laugh. We have a good time making it up.
Well,
Um,
laughing is always good.
It's always good, but yeah, my co because we have
Yes.
to laugh at what we call our little me's, like our egos that are all like, "Wah," as we're breaking those poor things down. And then I would actually, if you don't mind, also love to share about an event that I'm going to be doing,
Yes, please.
which is
And
in
are you in LA now? Is that?
no, but I do go to LA to shoot the podcast. We shoot the podcast in LA,
Oh,
so
great. I'd love to come down and do
yeah,
that.
that would be really cool. I'd love to hear more about your work.
My former husband has a flight school where he's taught flying, so
Oh,
I can get a quick flight if I need, just out of nowhere, and just ask him, could you just drop me off in LA for
oh my God, that would be
you know,
great.
I
That'd be
met
great. We will
Larry
shoot.
Hagman that way, the
Oh,
actor. He invited me for lunch, and I didn't know how to get to Ojai instantly.
uh-huh.
So
And you're
he flew me down there. It was
oh,
wonderful,
that's
and
that's a
I got
great
to
well,
make it on time. Yeah, we had a great time.
may invite you to we're doing so I'm doing on this event called the Channel Panel in West Virginia. It's a lot of
Hmm.
channelers like myself, including Bashar, and I'm not sure if you've heard of Wendy Kennedy. These are just some of the bigger names that are going to be there. But it's going to be a super powerful vortex of, you
It's
know,
a conference, you
it's a
say?
conference. It's a 3-day conference, and we all do a when you buy a pass, you have access to everybody's it's not free obviously because you pay for the pass, but we all
Right.
do a presentation, and then all of us are also doing a second workshop that you can purchase separately if you
So
want to.
the
So
name of the conference and the
it's
dates
called
of
the Channel Panel, and it's November 14th to 16th. It's right there on the front page of my website as well. So even if you just go to Circle Evolution, but Bashar is going to be there. If anybody of your people have watched Interviews with Extra Dimensionals, which was on Gaia TV, which I was on, a lot of the Ruben Langdon, who hosted that, who's the guy who did the tandem in the video, he's going to be there, and a bunch of the channels that were on his program are going to be there. So it's going to be awesome. Very powerful energy gateway. It's going to be some paradigm shifting stuff. So if you people are into really working with the energies and learning more about how reality is created, what is the other side. It's going to be very cool.
very cool. And that's in November of this year.
November this year, November 14th to 16th. Like I said, it's right there on the everything you like. There's so many things that we're offering. We also have an amazing program, Monday Night Awakening. I try to put the most important stuff on the front of my website. But it's
Mhm.
hard because I just from channeling a lot, I produce a lot of content. So we have a whole university, we have a library of over 1,000 recordings. I do a free consultation too. So if people are just like, okay, I want to know more, you can set up a free consultation, and I can walk you through what part of our work might be best suited for you at this time.
Well, thank you. That's very wonderful. So, our listeners have all kinds of opportunities to either go on the website and see about a future conference in November. They can find out how to contact you if they want to have a one free phone consultation. If
Yep.
there's all sorts of other events and things that are going on, they'll be able to find it all on your website.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is wonderful. And I want to thank you for joining us here today. I've really enjoyed this. I have to say, as I said, you're my first skydiver. Hooper. I've had many channelers, but
Yeah.
none of the other no hoopers and skydivers. So I'm just so happy for you to be my first. And
It
this
was
is
really a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed this. So just stay with me for a minute while I close out the show. And I want to thank all you listeners for joining us here today. We love reading your comments, liking, subscribing on the YouTube channel. And you can find us on all the social media sites. We have Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and check us out and enjoy. And remember, share your stories because stories can heal.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.